Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to come from the 5th chapter of the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, I would argue, is Solomon's masterpiece. These are the three biblical books which he penned. Each correspond to a biographical era in his life. The Song of Solomon are reflective of his youthfulness, and the middle years are Proverbs, and the mature years are Ecclesiastes. So Solomon's dilemma is having unlimited wealth and unlimited wisdom, at least as far as humans are concerned, and he's still stuck with the dilemma of finding the meaning and purpose of life. So this prompts an investigation, and so far in the narrative, in the first chapter, he reduces everything which seems significant to an equality of nothingness, expounds on the folly of wisdom towards the close of the first, continues the expansion only in the direction of wealth in chapter 2, and then in chapter 3 he takes observations of natural cycles and suggests that everything is an appointment, not an accident in nature. And then he bemoans some of the injustice which goes on in spite of him ruling justly. And he also takes him to the palace, the courtroom, and the marketplace. So Solomon has a mind, even though he couldn't, strictly speaking, relate to the lives of many of his subjects. He was at least aware of their existence and the commonality of their dilemmas, because these people are also living, don't have a sense of their purpose and mission in life. So the opening verse of the 5th chapter reads, "Guard your steps when you go to the house of Elohim, and draw near to listen, rather than to give the slaughtering of fools, for they do not know that they do evil." So there are protocols to be observed if you are summoned to present your petition to a head of state. Now, if we secured access to the White House, we would prepare our words carefully, yet so many of us, the simplicity of which we have access to theoretically approach the divine courtroom is universal and much more a simple process, yet we do not treat it accordingly. We say things we shouldn't. We don't think about what we say. And so the benefit there, now the value of prayer is thought of as a dialogue between humanity and divinity, and the supplementary component of prayer is meditation. And to sum it up simply, prayer is talking, meditation is listening. So to get the most out of being in the divine presence, we'd better to be quick to hear and slow to speak, from the book of James. And going through the mechanics and motions of ritual religion can convince the fool that they are meriting something in the divine favor, but little do they know that they do evil. And Solomon in the book of Proverbs compares the slaughtering of the wicked to an abomination in some points. "Do not be hasty with your mouth, and let not your heart hurry to bring forth a word before Elohim. For Elohim is in the heavens, and you on earth. Therefore, let your words be few." So better to say something significant than say much without saying really anything at all. In order to make the most of our prayers, we should make each word count and calculate it cautiously, rather than being flippant at the mouth, undisciplined, expressing our every whim and desire without discipline. We have to channel our control to make the most of praying with Elohim, and he's describing the hypocrisy which was endemic throughout Israel throughout her history. "For a dream comes through the greatness of the task, and a fool's voice is known by his many words." So fools basically speak because they have to speak. To paraphrase Plato, a wise man speaks because he has something to say. A fool speaks because he has to say something. So fools have a perpetual penchant to ramble on, and the prudent man concealeth knowledge, but the heart of fools proclaimeth foolishness. In Proverbs 12:23, there's a whole litany of other proverbs where Solomon essentially reiterates the same concept, that words are frequent from fools. "When you make a vow to Elohim, do not delay to pay it. He takes no pleasure in fools. Pay that which you have vowed." So the act of entering a vow was voluntary, but it was permanent, and they were bound by the vow. So if you promise something to Elohim, if you staked your credibility and your reputation on that vow, you better make sure you do it. And so this practice was also endemic. People were making vows flippantly that they had not considered the consequences of it. And he takes no pleasure in fools. That means he's not going to have mercy on you just because you stupidly stumbled into a vow in which you evoked the sacred name to secure your temporary security. It is better for not to vow than to vow and not pay. That's a simple statement. Doesn't really demand elaboration. Do not allow your mouth to cause your flesh to sin, nor say before the angel of Elohim that it was a mistake. Why should Elohim be wroth at your voice and destroy the works of your hands? So the idea is that, now this reminds one of the dialogues that the Savior has with the Sadducees in Matthew 15, where they were bemoaning the lack of observation of the Mosaic dietary standards in food preparation, where the masters at the conclusion of it said that it's not what comes out of the mouth, but what dwells in the heart, which determines a man's moral worth. So the potential for the mouth to cause your flesh to sin is clearly present and inescapable and unavoidable. Our mouth gets us into trouble. It causes trouble for not just itself. And then he's hypothetically explaining this metaphorical sinner who has to explain himself to the angel to say that it was a mistake. And a rhetorical question, why should Elohim be wroth at your voice and destroy the works at your hand? Now, you entered into a vow and you dishonored it and disrespected the one to whom you made the vow to, so justice demands that you be silenced and destroyed. For in much dreaming and in many words there is futility, but fear Elohim. Now this is odd because Solomon is reflecting some of the epistemological bias against dreams, which are one source of revelatory communication, although the potential for demonic and other alternate spirits to enter into one dream and give them tidbits of revelatory information is clearly present. So Solomon is distinguished. He was visited in a dream by Elohim. You can read of this. You can type in Corey Johnston, 1 Chronicles 1. It's actually the 2 Chronicles, but I made the typographical error. Or read the 3rd chapter of the 1st book of Kings to learn of the origin of Solomon's wisdom. It came in prayer. And he was mindful of the, we can elaborate on that further, but we rather stay topic on this. You can check out those other videos if you're curious. If you see the oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in a province, do not be astonished at the matter, for a higher than the high is guarding, and there are higher ones over them. So every act of injustice, including but not limited to a judge who administers mercy to the wicked and justice to the innocent, unmerited, is going to be unable to escape the divine justice. So every moral decision we make, we will have to answer for it at the end of this life, in the life to come. But we have the assurance that if we have sought out justice more than injustice, then we will be granted mercy. And the increase of the land is for all. The king himself is served from the field. So he was aware of the fact that the agricultural bounty or lack thereof could make or break a nation. These were an agricultural people in the age of antiquity, and the king was fed from the land. That's just how the arrangement was. He who loves silver is not satisfied with silver, nor he who loves wealthy increase. That too is futile. So Solomon had experienced the abundance of wealth. He was the wealthiest ruler, at least in his own time, if not ever. And yet he observed that riches brought him and anyone else who seeks it for the source of satisfaction no lasting satisfaction. And it's significant that he says love of silver, because money itself is not evil. It is the love thereof which is the source of evil. And that ultimately induces an idolatry of sorts in the covetous, and that they love, guard, and trust in their money. They spend all their hours getting and guarding it, so it really becomes a cruel master. With the increase of goods, there is an increase of those consuming them. What advantage, then, is there to their owners but to look on? This is an observation born from the upper station in the class system, whereby the economy essentially was a microcosm of his life. Sweet is the sleep of the laborer, whether he eats little or much, but the plenty of the rich does not let him sleep. So he's saying it's better to be impoverished and able to sleep at night with a clean conscience than to be so occupied with the gain and guarding of money that you fail to sleep adequately. So wealth, at least the trust in it, or the idolatrous extreme of it, is a source not of satisfaction or peace, but consternation, commotion, and confusion. There is a sickly evil I have seen under the sun, riches kept for their owner, for this is evil. So he's observant of all tiers of the society under him, and the landowning class many of them would have been, their lives would have revolved around the pursuit of gain and wealth. And so he observes, he calls it a sickly evil. That means it's a pathological propensity, not just an ordinary sin, but it's clearly endemic throughout his kingdom. But those riches through evil use, and he brings forth a son, and there is not in his hand. So one of Solomon's personal dilemmas was the moral quality of his anticipated successor, Rehoboam, who ended up failing abysmally at succeeding him as a result of his incompetence and ineptness. The United Kingdom of Israel split into northern and southern kingdoms, so the Davidic dynasty retained control of the Judean line, whereas there was a fluctuation of dynasties which ruled the northern kingdom. But as he came naked from his mother's womb, so he returns to go as he came. But from his labor, which goes into his hand, he takes none whatsoever. So he's aware of the fact that everything we can amass, all the wealth we can accumulate, we cannot take with us in the next life. We will enter as we came into this one, that is naked, with nothing and nothing external. And Job says this in Job 121 when he is in the opposite situation of Solomon, really an unexaggerated to say the worst conceivable scenario of divine providence allowable. But he essentially reiterates the same theme and concept. And this too is a grievous evil. Exactly as he came, so he goes. And what gain has he since he toiled for the wind? So he's comparing the pursuit and accumulation of wealth to chasing the wind, because you can never have enough, and there will always be more, and it can bring no satisfaction. So that is analogous to chasing the wind. Even if you caught it, what are you going to do with it? All his days he also eats in darkness, and with much sorrow, in sickness and wrath. So these are not pleasant emotions he's describing in the covetous man, but malignant, pathological tumors of his covetousness. So darkness, sorrow, sickness, wrath, those are all invariably negative elements and ingredients of the emotional psychosis of this man. See what I have seen. It is good and pleasant for one to eat and drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, in which he toils under the sun, all the days of his life, which Elohim gives him, for it is his portion. So Solomon once more reiterates in this book that there is nothing sinful in taking pleasure in the fruits of our labor, as long as you are mindful and grateful of the giver and don't value him less than the gift. So the temptation is clear that we can substitute the wealth we acquire for our relationship, which is imperishable treasure, with our Maker. Furthermore, when Elohim has given any man riches and wealth, and permitted him to enjoy them, and to receive his portion and rejoice in his labor, this is a gift of Elohim. So Solomon was not sinful necessarily in constructing a courtly, extravagant palace lifestyle, inasmuch as he remained cognizant of Elohim and mindful and grateful of him, and didn't lose sight of the fact that it was not by his works, but by his grace that he had acquired all the wealth, power, prestige, and wisdom. Though it not be much, let him be remembered the days of his life, because Elohim bears witness by the gladness of his heart. So the reflection of our hearts, our outlook will determine the outcome at the judgment. If we are grateful and childlike and compliant, we will be welcomed to eternal salvation, whereas if we valued the gifts of creation above the giver, who is the creator, we have nothing praiseworthy to look forward to. And that's all the time we have for today. Tune in next time. Bye-bye.